Hello ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, this is Lee from Disc-Heads, and today we're bringing you another episode of Disc Designs. Now today I'm not going to be designing any discs for my team, this is actually a personal disc for me, and what we're going to be doing is changing the Vandal. This is one of the 9 speeds in my bag. As you are probably aware if you listen to our podcast, our team seems to throw a lot of 7 speeds and 9 speeds. So I'm going to convert this disc into something very memorable from my childhood. Now, as you can tell, it's called the Vandal, and I'm going to keep in with the theme of being quite naughty. The thing I'm going to be turning it into today is Krang from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, heroes in a half shell, turtle power.
Yes, one of the most iconic kids' TV themes and intros of all time, I think, personally. But anyway, yes, Krang was one of the villains from this show. If you remember, he looks like a bit of chewed up chewing gum, is the best way of describing it. And I'm not going to lie, he was an evil warlord. And the one thing I remember fondly of it is because he was from Dimension X. He had this really cool vehicle that would travel back and forth from Dimension X to Earth. And that was the Technodrome, one of the coolest things ever. Look at that thing. It just looks ridiculous. But anyway, I digress. We're going to get straight into making this disc. Now, like I said on the previous episodes, you want to try and find an image that works and is easily stencilable, or, you can draw it effectively. And I found this fantastic image on Google, kind of a mix of the 80s Krang with a comic book twist, because it looks like the original comic book run of Krang. Now, as you can see, it's quite small to begin with, so we had to blow it up. So we've got 2 designs for this, guys. We have one that is my reference photo, but then we've also got the blown up one, which is here, and that is actually going to be our stencil. And I've kind of drew a rough circle around it, so what I need to have, or what I'm going to turn into the stencil. So with this being said, guys, you are going to need a few items to do this art project, shall we say. So first you need the disc, so we've got the Vandal. Then we're going to use a scalpel or hobbycraft knife. I've got this really cool set here with loads of different sizes and shapes of knives, which is really, really cool. Permanent marker pens, so obviously if you're using colours or blacks, feel free to use those. And then paint pens, which we're going to get to talking about them when we get to that part, because this is the most controversial part of this design, because you do not want to change the, should we say, the weight of the disc, which the weight of this disc is 174. So with that, we are going to first off exaggerate the stencil lines, and by doing this, all I'm doing is taking a permanent marker pen, and that is what I'm going to use to go over this image, because it basically pixelated out of existence when I blew it up. So I'm just going over the stencil, exaggerating the lines, and it will actually end up looking like this. And as you can see, it really makes the stencil pop a little bit more, and also you know exactly where you're going to cut in the next bit when we eventually get to cutting out the stencil. But first, as you can see, we have the Vandal. It's got this lovely artwork by Dynamic Discs on there. We need to get that logo off, unfortunately, and what we're going to do is use acetone, but in the UK where I'm from, we call it nail polish remover. So I use 100% acetone / nail varnish remover, and I take away the logo with just a few dabs of this on some kitchen roll, and I wipe it off. Now make sure you're in a well ventilated area, because this stuff stinks and it can be very harmful, so make sure you're doing it outside or you're wearing a mask, so you are looking after yourself. Now with certain discs, when you take off their logo, some of the remains of it will stay, and this is actually what happened with the Vandal. With this shot that you're probably seeing now, you can see that the Vandal image is still on the disc, so just be aware of that when you're thinking about designing a disc. So you might have the image still remaining on the disc, but when you draw over it, you won't see unless you look really, really closely. Now we're going to go straight back to our exaggerated stencil, and what we're going to do is we're going to start cutting pieces of the stencil out. So now just take your time with this, and obviously if you're a youngster, feel free to get an adult to help you, but if you're an adult, just take your time. Again, just make sure you don't cut your fingers off, because they're sharp blades. And with this, you want to just take your time, And like I said previously with the exaggerated stencil, when you come to cutting, don't worry if you mess up too much, because when you start penciling in later, you can see it might be a bit too square, but when you use your permanent markers, you can round it off to make it a little bit more smoother. Now, after several minutes, or shall we say 30 to 40 minutes, you should have a stencil that looks something like this. Quite scary, obviously, but then you want to transfer the stencil onto the disc. Now, I just basically align it up where I want, and I use a little bit of blue tack on the other side, and I just stick down the stencil onto the disc. When you have done this, you then need to start penciling the stencil on there. Now, when you start penciling, like I said on the previous episode, you just got to be careful of the plastic you're using. So obviously with the Vandal here, it's a little bit gummy. So I had to really press on the disc. So I just did several passes of my pencil onto the disc and took my time on this part. Now, whenever you do any sort of designing on discs, guys, I would really recommend just taking your time on this penciling part of it, because if you make a mistake, obviously you can take an eraser or a rubber and just rub it out and do it, but on sometimes with the plastic it will just stay on the disc, which can be quite unfortunate. Now, with that, you should have something that looks a little bit like this. Looks a bit bizarre, but trust me, this is your base stencil that you've done. So now all you need to do is grab your permanent markers and you begin outlining and colouring in the parts that need to be coloured in. So you want to obviously look at your reference photo that you've taken. Obviously we've got another printout, and we know that most of the lines here are going to be black. So we have no issues with that. And we obviously know the mouth is, a lot of it is black, but then there's a big part of it that's going to be red. So obviously we just got to keep looking back at our reference stencil, or should we say our artwork that we've got, and just make sure that you don't mess up in the nicest way possible, because permanent marker is a pain to get off a disc. It can be done with acetone and a few other things, but you just want to take your time. And because we've only done a few of the lines on the stencil so far, I actually freehand a lot of the, shall I say, the gumminess of Krang, should we say, the outlines and the wrinkles, because remember, he is just a piece of, chewing gum at the end of the day. So now, with that being said, you should have a disc that looks something like this. Now, it looks really cool at the moment. Now we're going to get onto the controversial thing, which are the paint pens, which we're going to be using a red, yellow, and white. Now, obviously, in the rules, it states that you cannot change the weight of the disc. So, the most important thing about these projects that I do is I weigh the discs before and after. Now, I know for a fact that this disc is 174 grams. I made sure of it because I have my scales, and I weighed it, and it is perfectly fine. Now, with that being said, we're going to start doing all the paint pens on this, and we're going to do red for the tongue to begin with, and then we're going to do yellow for the eyes and white for the teeth. Now, the one thing I will say about using paint pens is just take your time with them, because some of them will flow lovely because you'll need to shake them, and you need to give them a fully good shake before using them. And on the screen now you can see that the yellow didn't take really well to the disc. Now, all I did after this was do one more pass of the yellow, and it turned out absolutely perfect. So you just got to take your time, take your time doing it, and also let the paint dry, because if you go straight back to it, you're going to undo all that colouring in that you've just done with the paint pen. And then this brings us on to the final part of the disc, which is the eyes. Now, the eyes were very simple. All I did was use a black permanent marker pen, my finest one that I've got, and drew basically the eyes onto the disc, and they turned out pretty good. So with that, I'm going to add the final bit of the eyes, which is the white to make the eyes pop. And yeah, I did a baby circle of white paint pen onto them, and this is how the disc ended up looking. Yeah, I'm incredibly happy with how my Vandal turned out. I think it turned out absolutely phenomenal. I've been throwing it around on some practice rounds that I've already been doing, and it looks phenomenal in the air. It looks really cool and blurred when you throw it, but also it just stands out in my bag for my driver, or one of my drivers. So hopefully this will inspire you to either try this out or do something else and get your creativity flowing when it comes to designing discs for disc golf. And on the screen right now is a subscribe button to our YouTube channel, and also thumbnails on the screen to Design Discs, the whole playlist so far, and also our podcast if you want to check out our latest season, which is season 3, which has started on this YouTube channel. If you've enjoyed it, please leave a like. A like is much appreciated. Comment below, tell us your thoughts on drawing on discs, if you think it's cool or if you think it's bad. We would love to hear your feedback. And without further ado, guys, take care, have a good one, and we'll see you in the not too distant future for more disc golf content here on Disc Heads.